Hey everybody, welcome again to another edition of Forward Focus Thursday. This is the best part of my week. I hope it's the best part of your week. Looking forward to being together again, celebrating and praising the Lord as always, but also just having a good discussion and a good time overall. I want to thank our wonderful AV team, production team, Reverend Sandy Pace, Brother Alan Lavender, Sister Letitia Frey, and everyone else who helps to make this special. Want to thank Reverend Stephen Cousin, Dr. Michael A. Cousin Sr., Bishop Philip R. Cousin Sr., for all that they do and continue to do. And want to thank you, the viewers, for watching and making this something that we've been doing now for a good while. And we're just excited every week to be able to do it. Also, when you get a chance, please like and share this video with your friends and your network. Please like and share, and we'll continue to push forward and continue to be able to hopefully encourage people to engage in dialogue and conversation, which is what we try to do here. So as we open up, we're just going to bow our heads for a moment of prayer. We thank you, Lord, for this time you've given us again to come before you, asking that the words of our mouths and meditations of our hearts are acceptable to you. Let us have a wonderful discussion today. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Man.
So before we move to what we're talking about today, want to just get a temperature check on everybody. Go starting with Steve and then Mike and then Dad, just seeing how y'all are doing. What's going on with you?
I'm doing all right. Struggle is real, but I'm okay.
Okay.
Doing well here in Chapel Hill, the southern part of heaven, and in Carrboro, the Paris of the Piedmont. Doing well.
Well, I'm doing fine in the Windy City. It hasn't blown me away yet. Anchored and tied down in Chicago.
Okay. Well, um I'm doing fine too. I'm just laughing at y'all. I'm doing fine too. Everything is well here. Just getting ready for our general conference and leaving, I think, in 2 weeks, give or take, and just getting ready for that. Kids out of school, getting them situated for the summer, but we are all good, all is well. Today, as you know, we try to do different topics and different things, and I think we have a really good topic today. So we're going to ask that everybody please comment, like and share the video, but please comment on the video as well. And I'm going to turn things over to Steve, Reverend Steve, who's going to set up today's topic and discussion for us. I know what the topic is going to be. My father and my brother have not been briefed on the topic, so this ought to be really good today. Trust me. So, Steve, take it away.
So I want to set the scene. It was brought to our attention as of this past Monday in New Haven, where the school district put on an anti-bias, anti-racism training for administrators and faculty. And so they were using the terms like white privilege and whiteness into the discussion. Once the training was over, a principal of one of our schools was triggered by the use of those terms, and she had a conversation with two white teachers after the training and was offended by white privilege and whiteness. And she said, what if I went around saying the N word multiple times? And so the faculty was concerned about her language. They brought it up to the assistant principal, and they brought the principal in, and she doubled down on her statement, saying the N word again multiple times. That led to an investigation, her being put on leave. Once the investigation was over, they only demoted her from a principal to an assistant principal and be reassigned to another school. And the reason being was we cannot fire her due to how she used the N word in the context that she stated. So my question to this panel, to this group, is it ever appropriate for a person of a different ethnicity to use that word, that derogatory word, that racial slur?
What's the question?
Is it ever appropriate for another person of a different ethnicity to use that racial slur, the N word, that word that I'm going to say? Because right now they're giving her cover, saying that it was the context how she used it. She didn't call anybody the N word, but she said it out of frustration because she was triggered and they want to give her leeway. So I'm asking this panel, is it ever appropriate for anybody outside of the Black race to use that word?
Well, I'm going to start. I'm a trigger daddy's memory. A couple of years back, NAACP had its convention in Detroit, and Daddy was speaking down there for the religious service, and they had a funeral. They were going to bury the N word. You remember that, Daddy? They had a big funeral. They were going to bury
Yes.
the N word,
Yes.
and we were watching. The Daddy said, he said, that's a useless thing they're doing because somebody's going to resurrect that word before they even get back up to the convention center. He said that's a use. We went on to our service. It was the church service for the NAACP. I think if persons knew the history of that word, well, they know the history of it. And that person, she knew exactly what she was doing. We can't be racist because we are not a part of the majority. But obviously, she, it's amazing how that word has taken on its own life. Those persons on the other side of the track feel as if they have a right to say it because they hear it being said. That word was established by them, was created by them, and they do not wish to relinquish that word. So no, I do not think it's right because for the fact that she is in education, and in education, she should, well, just because you're educated doesn't necessarily mean you're going to know better. I think that with that, she should be one of the ones that are leading the charge of teaching the history and the negative connotation of that word. I mean, it's just negative. And no, it is not right. Now, I know the argument is, well, they hear us say it. They hear us say it. So how we refer to one another. That's a whole nother subject in itself. But I think that no, it is not. No, she shouldn't be saying it. No.
It's difficult to put in a box any kind of expression that has been used in so many ways in so many different times by so many different people. It is, number one, it should never be appropriate when it is used to describe an incident, an act, or a part of a community that is present in our society. It it should not be a descriptive adjective for a community or an ethnicity, and it's difficult, very, very difficult to put a word like that in a box because you always get the sub argument. Well, if Black people use it, why can't we use it? Why is it that they can call themselves that? Can Caucasians call themselves rednecks, crackers, and all the other things that we use? So, that's the difficulty. That's the box in which we put ourselves when we start labeling words which have ethnicity context and put them in a certain kind of prescribable place, which sometimes cannot be described. Because as the lady tried to wiggle out of that, saying she wasn't saying that, deep down in her mind, she had thought that all the while, or she would not have said it. So that's almost one of the catch-22s. What is right and what is wrong? Nobody knows. It is. If you're on one side, yes. If you're on the other side, no. It is a very difficult situation to try to prescribe with any kind of authenticity that makes it legal or illegal when how you use it, when it's been used by so many people in so many different ways.
The question I have is, what makes it so alluring for persons of another race to just want to use that word. I mean, we can debate the finer points of whether or not even black people should use it. But what makes other races, especially white people, what makes them so just drawn to use that word while at the same time still saying, but I'm not racist, I'm not racist, but there's so much of an allure to using that word. To me, that's oxymoronic. It doesn't make sense.
I want to. My wife said something, profound to me last night, and she said that, you know, there are Caucasians, some of them who want to be oppressed. Where I look back to, you know, the issue of face masks during the pandemic and how that almost started, protests and riots, saying that you're infringing upon, our rights. There are those who, feel like they can't say the word house infringing upon their rights as to how come I'm not allowed to say it and you are oppressing me, without really understanding the context. I think it's very simple. It's alluring because they were told that they can't say it or they can't do something. And because of that and the privilege that evokes in that, that's how they get offended. Like, why can't I do this? Why am I going to be punished? And here's the interesting part about this story for me is that we have a superintendent who is black. She is from Jamaica, but she is defending this principal. And without the principal having to come out to issue a public apology, she has not made any other statements. She basically went away, but you have the superintendent and some other African Americans who are defending her saying it.
Um, do you think part of that could be the fact that she is, while being black, she is not necessarily African American? Does that make sense?
Well, to add further context, she put out a statement, the superintendent, actually saying that Juneteenth was the day that the Tulsa massacre occurred. So that basically I told you exactly all what you needed to hear.
There was a time, I think sometimes persons we think would be familiar with our history are not familiar with it. I'll give you a case. Joe, you remember, I think you recall this. We were in Nassau,
I knew you were going there. I knew you were going
and the
there.
gentleman was preaching a good sermon about standing strong in the battle. As I'm sitting there listening, and he talks about a general that was known to stand. He was called, he was as strong as a rock. He would stand in the battle. People would be encouraged by him. And his name, they called him, and I was listening. I said, don't do it. I said, please don't say it. Don't say it. And he said it, Stonewall Jackson. I said, my God, I looked at Joe. Joe was rather young at age. I said, Joe, don't make that mistake. Know your history.
And even I knew not to do that.
And I said, this is a man who fought to keep us enslaved. How can you lift up an image like that? There are numerous images in the Bible, in history, but you picked out this. And I chalked it up for the fact that, well, maybe that person is not familiar with the problem of race in our country, even to the point on a different trip where we were treated differently in a restaurant that had the old South theme painted on the back wall, the restaurant. I'm not gonna call the name of the hotel. I remember this hotel, but they would not let me come in with my mother and father and Joe because I had on a polo shirt and said I needed to be dressed for dinner. And they had a funky jacket that they hung on the back of my chair. But then later on, this white couple comes, the fellow that has on a shirt similar to me and shorts, and they let him sit down and then put a jacket on the back of his chair. And my father called him out on that. And the maitre d' said, well, we're sorry, but we don't have that problem of race in this country like you do. And that bothered me. That really bothered me. We all come from the same place. The only difference is some were just dropped off the boat a little earlier than others.
And that was my point, Mike, because you know, and not to that's just not to disparage anyone or anything, but you were talking about the lady is Jamaican. Shout out to my Jamaican sisters and brothers. But according to research that I just looked up, because what is Google, Stephen?
That's nature's resource right there. You find everything right there. What's the problem?
Jamaica was an English colony from 1655 when it was captured by the English from Spain, and a British colony from 1707 until the year Michael was born, 1962. So do you think then, because there was that rule there for so long, that obviously it's still ingrained there even more than it normally would be?
Well, you have to look at even the slogan of the country about the blending of cultures, the blending of races, become a beautiful people. I mean, just to surmise it. So a lot of times people get that view and think it's like that everywhere else, but it's not.
It's not even like that there either.
Well, we know they have their economic disparities. You know, you have, you have Kingston, then you have Trenchtown. You have your places there. Shout out to my friends after living in South Florida. That was a real big discussion we had in South Florida. That they would often look at us who are indigenous in terms of those of us who were born here in this country. They would look at us as if we did not have the initiative, or we weren't industrious to bring about our own economic improvement.
And see that's another. And all of us are black. Jamaicans are black. Persons from Nassau, the Bahamas are black. From all the other Caribbean islands are black. We're black. That's just another tool to divide people who really, like you said, came from the same source, but were just dropped off at different places. But we're all black, and that's just another tool of division.
The problem is most of the persons that are in the Caribbean basins. I can recall when I was bishop over the first district, there was an opportunity for Bermuda to have statehood and self-government. That would have meant that John Swan, who was in the premier, would have been in charge. He was a black man. Do you know that they voted to stay with the Queen and to stay part of the empire? And do you know some AME preachers led the whole thing? I was shocked, utterly shocked, when it come to find out they voted down the opportunity to have independence from the crown. Now, that was not so long ago. That kind of thinking is still prevalent in many of the persons who have an allegiance to the crown and not recognizing what the crown has done to them for years and still does to them. Look at what's happening in England right now. It's still happening. So it is so ingrained in our culture that one of the difficulties of being black in this world is that we have out the white culture to become so exciting and prevailing that most black folk want to ascribe to be within a part of the white culture in so many different ways. So many people want it. And it's far too difficult. One of the things that they're lauding now is interracial marriages. What does that say? What does that say? That it only says that now you're getting to a point where you're doing what you couldn't do before. And you're getting to a point where you're being recognized as being an equal to what they are. It is a psychological difficulty for many people who have been under the boot and under the control of a culture and a society that has negated everything positive that they do and lift up everything negative almost that they do as being a positive of what you ought to ascribe for. So I am not shocked that someone did that. We have it all. Look at Texas. What's going on? Do you know that the chairman of the Republican Party in Texas is a black man who's espousing all of the stuff that Texas is doing to keep us down? It is hardly difficult, very, very difficult to imagine how you can ascribe to what they're doing and say it with joy and glee as saying they're doing the right thing. And
He came up.
somehow we just got things all mixed up.
That's the gentleman that came over from Florida. He was a former representative around, I think around Palm Beach, but he went to Texas
Yep.
to lead that cause. There's a book by Randall Kennedy back from 2002. I purchased it when I was at Harvard. The title is The N Word. And he talks about the history of it, the troublesome history of it, and of us trying to paint the narrative of controlling it. He's a black conservative. He writes about the word, and it is available. I'm looking at the Harvard Educational Review upon it. I bought that copy, and it was interesting to read his whole thesis of taking control of the word and desensitizing it so it would not be the trigger that what it is. But I think that for us as a people, there comes a time, I think we have to call out those persons who try to use the excuse because we hear you say it, we can do it. No, help us to eliminate, help us to remove that word from the conversation, from our dialogue, from our vocabulary. No, it's not right. And I think our brothers and sisters who are with us in this struggle should learn about the history. We have a unique history in this country, and we're still just discovering pieces of it. From the Tulsa massacre now to Juneteenth, people are really realizing what it was all about. We have a serious history, a problem here that we have to. I mean, this is just a piece of it.
Yeah, and the book is available too. I just was looking on Audible. It is available also, Mike, and for those that like the audio books, it's available there. What was his, if you recall, what was his take on that, Mr. Kennedy?
Mr. Kennedy.
Out of curiosity.
We as a people take ownership of the word. Do not allow the word to trigger us. Just as you would hear persons, I would not use the other pejorative terms that he uses in the books, but those terms that we use, as simply we use it, we take control of it and be able to desensitize ourselves. And when we show the majority that it does not affect us or it is not our trigger, then there is the possibility. His thing is there's a possibility that it would be a word that would be taken away because it does not trigger the effect that it once had on us.
The only thing I'll say about that, I understand James Baldwin said the same thing. When somebody calls him that, he does respond to it because he said, that's not me. And you take the power back. So to me, it's not just desensitizing the word, but there were those persons about what the word actually means. And because of their position of power, because that's what they describe to you in their position of power, how can they actually harm you in that position? It is one thing, for this principle to say the word and be desensitized, to it. But in their context, they're thinking about using that word and the imagery that's associated with that word. Now think about how it's going to flow to how she evaluates teachers, how she actually does discipline, to students. So with that, it's not just the word in itself, but it's the context behind it and the policies and the influence that you have when you use that word.
Well, I say that this is a word that she's used before, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
So what use this as an example to call out what it is that she is if she could use it with such ease, or if she had, or if it was such a problem for her that this word causes, and she wants to use it, chances are she's used it several times before, and she knows how to use it.
It's not just saying it, but in her actions. You know, when I think about maybe because New Haven is a black and brown city. So I'm thinking about a person who maybe was disruptive in class. And because she already used that word, that could be the difference between suspension or detention, you know, or just saying, hey, they're just having a bad day, what have you. But how are you disciplining, you know, those children that you maybe deem as being disruptive or behavioral problems, or students who may not be doing well in school academically? How are you viewing them? So to me, it's just much more than the word, but it's the policies you put and the practice behind those words that you use to ascribe us. That's what I'm more concerned with.
Well, let me just take a little break, just not a break, but just, and y'all, please, I see we have a few people watching us today. Thank you for watching. Those that are watching, come on and join in the comments so we can get this discussion going and see how you think about it and how you feel about it. The use of that word by anyone, but particularly those outside of our race, using that word. So, Dad, you were gonna say something?
No, it you know, it is difficult. There, I'm just trying to remember. Richard Pryor had a scene in one of his shows where he was in an argument with a Caucasian, and every time that Caucasian would say the N word to him, he'd come up with something else, a word for them, and they just looked and stood and stopped and looked at each other because they had an argument of using terms that were difficult for either ethnicity to absorb and take in. And sometimes I wonder what would happen if we would take the same attitude if someone called them the worst despicable term you can use for a Caucasian. Wonder what that would trigger.
Well,
That was the Saturday Night Live skit with Chevy Chase and Richard Pryor. The word.
Yes.
Yes.
you know what? When we moved to when we moved, I'm not gonna put anybody out there, but when we moved in one of the places we lived, in a predominantly white neighborhood as a child, one of our neighbors had the used that word around me a lot. I was just a little kid and used that word around me a lot and just kept using it in everyday conversation. And I was about maybe 11, 12 years old. And I was very uncomfortable with it. Wanted to fight, but you know, I knew I could beat him. But then what good is that going to do? Because it's not really going to change anything. So I think it might have been you that helped me with this, Mike. I didn't know what to do. So you said, okay, he likes to use that word around you. Do what Dad just said. Take the word he doesn't like. And it was another word that is derogatory towards white people. And use that word around him a lot and see what happens. So every time he would say it, I would say the one back to him. And after a couple minutes of doing this, and maybe a little while doing this, he looked at me and said, that's offensive to me that you keep using that word. And I said, well, what do you think you've been doing the whole time? And he finally saw it. And he was like, I have been saying that the whole time, haven't I? I was like, yeah, so if you're going to say it, I'm going to say it. And that's what it boils down to, you know, the understanding of it. But one of the questions we have is, and we do have a comment, it said, I agree that the use of this word is horrible, but can you expound on why black people use this word?
I first heard that word used in high school when we were referring to ourselves in Birmingham. And I looked, I said, wait a
Hey,
minute.
Mike, never with the hard R, though. Never with
No,
the
it was a hard, it was, you know,
hard R.
with the A,
With the A.
you know, and I said, wait a minute now. I said, so I asked the brother has since deceased, and I, you know, lived in the projects. And I said, you know, it threw me for a loop. I said, why you call him that? Your friend that? Oh, that's my, you know. And I said, that encourages, you know, I'm thinking that encourages others to think that we give them the right that it's all right. We give them the green light. I think that it is a word, it's a difficult word to get rid of. I remember when Obama was running and Jesse Jackson was sitting at a hot mic. He didn't know the hot mic was on. And he used the word talking about Obama telling folk how to live, you know. I think that it is a word that is difficult to really eliminate because they've taken on another meaning for it for some folk. You know, it is really it's something that that's a thing that's in-house. That's like family business. Some things we don't discuss outside the house. That's family business. We have to teach our people that word has now been used to make billions in music, in language, in it's just we have to have that conversation. That's a good question, but it is coming upon us to check ourselves. You know, if we don't want others to do it, let's not do it. Let's not let them think that it's okay.
So Ta-Nehisi Coates actually was posed that very same question. And he had two different takes on it. He said that, you know, since he's been married, he's been calling his wife Honey. All right, that's his name for his wife is Honey. He can't use that word talking to another girl. They're saying the word honey, now it's a problem. Mm-hmm. Or the same way where like his wife and may call her friends the B word. I remember Missy Elliott, you know, did a song about that in the late 90s. So her girlfriends may say it to each other, but he knows he can't say that word to his wife because of the relationship and the dynamic that they have. And so for us, and how people may see how we may use it, how we may utilize it, you're coming at it from a different place. Ours can be used as a term of endearment, even though some of us don't like to use that word, but it can be seen as friendship. It can be seen as endearment. How you're using it is actually coming from that place of hatred. It's coming from a place of bigotry. It's coming from a place of tearing somebody down. So just because you see us using it in a different way doesn't give you creative license to actually say it another way. You know, and another question is posed, well, how come rappers can say it in rap songs and people are rapping it along to the song? And even with that, should I actually give them the right to say it? And I still say no. Because it's not their experience, it's not their context.
You know, it's funny, since moving back here, back to the South, and I was raised in the South, born in the South, born in North Carolina, raised in Alabama and Florida, spent a little time Northeast, a little time in the Midwest. Now I'm back in what I consider home. It's interesting because there is a derogatory word that that's used, you know, for Caucasian people. I consider it derogatory. And then, I'm not gonna say the word because we didn't say the N word. I'm not gonna say this word either. But let's just say it has something to do with the color of their necks. And I consider that a derogatory word. So I would not use that word towards one of them. However, I'm in the pool hall. Y'all know I love to shoot pool. I'm in the pool hall, and there's a song, and the title of the song is so I'll just give you the chorus. My town's smaller than your town. I got a bigger buck and bass on my wall. I got more kick in my draw. I got more spit in my chaw. La la la. And the whole chorus says, and I'm more that word than you. And so I see it in the same light. We're not the only ones that go through that because that's a word that I'm sure would offend one of them if I said it. But it's not offensive if they say it to each other. So then what's the big fuss over problem or not problem within our own community, Mike's point, but from the outside community, why should you care if I use that word or not? It's not your business because I see you doing the same thing. Y'all feel me?
But then it crosses the line of they hear us say.
by both ethnicities, it is a way of identification. If I wanted to identify a brother who I thought was really one of us, I more than likely you use he is my, you know what, and with not with the A and not the hard R on the end.
There you go, Dad.
Because,
That's it.
huh?
That's it. That's right.
And because it's a way of identifying and authenticating who he is. When I am a real and a hard A, I am really with my ethnicity, because that is what the other folk want to call me, but who I am, that's what I am. So when I call you my, you know what, that's saying I recognize you as being authentic, and your authenticity lures me to you and me to and you to me, because we are authentic. They can put us down, they can call us all we want, but we are authentic in what we're doing. And everything that they say is rebellious and wrong, we say what is right and good, and we are not accepting the rules of this society. We are helping to establish our own folk ways, our own culture, our own more ways. That's why rap got started, because rap was not in line with what the culture was. Rap was bringing a culture and a definition of what the culture was in the ethnicity, where you could use the A word to describe a friend of yours.
Which goes back to the book and the premise of Kennedy, the book that from 2002, and having that in-house conversation among ourselves about that word, when to use that word, why do we use that word? Is it one to put down? It is one of endearment. I think it's important. I mean, one of the persons that I've been reading about, Naomi Osaka, the tennis star, and she did a clip on nationality and ethnicity. So people are trying to put her in the box. Her mother is Japanese, her father is Haitian, and she dressed up in colors, in a colorful outfit that was symbolic of a Haitian holiday. And she was telling people that she was not going to allow the majority to put her in the box and make it seem like that she has features of both parents, but she said that she identifies with more so with her father than in terms of what the media tries to call her Japanese. I think that for us as a people, we have to take that which persons who try to make it negative, and to have that in-house conversation and say, no, that's not who you are. That's not what we are. We have our own language. That's why I think W.E.B. Du Bois says we're educationally schizophrenic, double consciousness, because we've got to deal with so much stuff. And it's amazing that we've made it this far. A good person on this commentary of this word would be the comedian David Chappelle, of how the word was originated. It's how we take the word down and how it is utilized. It's a word that's made money. Look at Quentin Tarantino in his movie Django Unchained. How many times you hear that word said?
Many. We have a question about that too. And in light of this conversation, then would it have been more appropriate or better for the principal to say N word versus the actual word? And if so, why or why not? Does that actually even make it better?
No, she said the actual word.
But would it have been better if she'd have said N word?
For me, yes.
Okay, why?
Because it's like where I look in the Jewish tradition, just to go a little bit off topic a little bit, where they don't write that word. They don't write the word God. They put a G dash D.
Yeah.
They never write out because they think it's revered, it's sacred, it's hollow. So for that, for us, they want to say the N word. To me, they are respecting, our how we feel about that word and how offensive that word can be. Just like you said with the R word or other derogatory words, we would never say it, or the C word, where we are acknowledging, but we're also revering, what that may mean and how they may offend others. So for me, if you would have said just the N word this, N word that, that means you understand how can it actually offend a community, and you are respecting those boundaries. So, but when you fully say it, that means you've crossed the line. It's like saying the N word, you're walking up to the line, but you know where the line is. And you're not crossing it. So you know where to go. So when you say the N word, it's okay. We get where you're going from, but not to cross that line.
Okay, that's good. Dad and Mike, what y'all think?
No, that shows that you are aware of those boundaries. And you cross that boundary, you're gonna get that smoke. That's yeah.
I think that shows if you just said the N word and not said the word itself, it showed the kind of respect and recognition that they have as to how inflammatory saying it is, even in that kind of situation. It would denote a sense of respect for the ethnicity of the person that you're describing and the way you're using it. I think it would have been much better if instead of going, she would have been.
Well, and you know what? The thing that gets me about everything, the part that we talked about it a little bit, and we won't touch on it today because we're going to be wrapping up in a little bit, but the fact that even after all of that, she was just moved from principal to vice principal, right, Steve?
Mm-hmm. And being reassigned to another school building.
I'm gonna hit you with the Ed Lover. Come on, son.
Huh?
She receives the same amount of pay as well, right?
Well, her pay, and this is public, not necessarily a reduction, but she's still getting paid $137,000 a year.
My point. She didn't get demoted. She really didn't get demoted.
Just like in the words of Ed Lover, come on, son.
Well, she didn't get hurt at all. Nothing. She probably had lesser responsibilities now where she's going with the same amount of pay. She got help.
Now what they say to punish her, she went from a 12-month salary to a 10-month salary. So there will be 2 months where she's not getting paid, but she's still making $137,000 a year. I think with that, buddy, you could figure out what to do with those 2 months.
The annual salary is what is important. Whether I'm going to give you $100,000 over 10 months or 12 months, it don't make no difference. I'm giving you $100,000. So now how you manage, that's your business and your budgetary a way to manage your money. Now, if they say we go cut 137,000 divided by 12, and then for whatever it is, 2 months of that we're going to take from you, that would have been punishment. But just say you're not going to get paid for 2 months, that don't mean nothing. That means the other check she gets over the 10 months is going to be bigger than she would have gotten. So there's no punishment at all.
What you doing about it, freedom fighter?
So right now there was an investigation. Now the school district nor our current city administration does not want to release that information. They do not want to make that investigation public. So we are demanding for the report to be released. Also, we are calling, once the report does get released, we do not feel that this principal, bottom line, should be fired. That I don't see her being reassigned to another school building. We're understanding her history and given this this investigation, what school that's predominantly Black and Latino is going to welcome her with open arms? So there's no way she can go to another school and actually create that same culture, climate, and environment that was in the previous school. So we are calling for her firing, but we're waiting for the investigation to come out. And then once that, we are calling for her firing. But here is the funny thing: the federal government just, the Senate unanimously passed like Juneteenth, a national holiday. I get that. You're going to have a lot of mayors speaking out about Juneteenth this coming weekend, but yet we have this mayor, in our city, white man, who talks about equity, talks about making sure everything's equal, talk about making sure that racial justice is achieved, but is absolutely silent on this issue, and is standing behind the superintendent, saying that I'm going to support the superintendent in this decision without him having to weigh in on the matter. That's concerning, where we do so many things in name only or face value, but when it comes to really doing the work of racial socialization and racial equity, nobody wants to do that. But we're willing to make speeches, talk about what we need to do, but when it comes to actually doing it, nobody's there to be found. And that's what's upsetting, to us.
I think that it's important that listening to you speak about this mayor. There's a song I like to listen to, Chocolate City by Parliament, George Clinton. And he says, you don't need the bullet when you got the ballot. And I think it is important. We have to get out and continue to use the ballot, to get what we want, to achieve what we want. Just remind that person, that you're silent now. Then that makes me believe you're going to be silent on some other issues, or you have been silent on some other issues. And when I listen to that song, I listen to it all the time, the terms, to each is reach, and I don't copy mine to have, but I'm coming after you, CC,
But
you
that's
don't need the bullet when you got the ballot.
that's what
On
happened.
the downstroke.
That's what happened down here at that contentious school board meeting. I think I told you all about it, where they were dealing with critical race theory, and they hired a young lady to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion. And before she could even take the job, she respectfully resigned, because she basically, in a press release along the lines, was just like, I'm not feeling welcome in this community anyway. Y'all don't really want this. And she said, I had no intention of teaching critical race theory. That wasn't what I wanted to do, but that's what they got in their minds that she was going to do. And at the meeting, some of the persons who are of a much lighter hue than we are, stood up in the meeting and said, don't worry, if y'all, to the school board, if y'all don't do what we want you to do now, we know how to vote. And that's what you just said, Mike.
That's what we as a people, let's not just have a kumbaya moment because we've seen the former president leave. There's some other things we've got to do. I think people need to understand there was a sort of like a mixed victory today with the Supreme Court rulings, with the affordable health care. They were able to rule in the favor in terms of making sure that it stays intact. But then you look at the hiring practices for private schools, with the Catholic school that came up as the case. I think that we have to continue to press on because our history is just beginning to be told. Juneteenth, Tulsa, there are so many other cases out there. When we start speaking about the truth, it makes other folk feel uncomfortable because it shows them for what they are and what they have done.
And to your point, Uncle Mike, and you could continue speaking after this. I just want to interject. Something happened at UNC, where a professor was denied tenure because she started the 1619 project, really trying to recenter and shape the African American narrative in the context of slavery. And because she's going to reshape, how we viewed history, now she's denied tenure. Now, UNC will not say that's the reason why. You're never supposed to give reasons why a person denied tenure, but one could surmise she was very well-renowned, very acclaimed. But once she attached herself to this project, and that's all the ammunition they needed. When you try to reframe history from another person's perspective, as opposed to the main narrative that they want to give out, that's how they shut us down. So when you talk about equity, when you talk about racial progress, you're trying to do it, but yet you're eliminating it. Even in Texas, they're eliminating critical race theory. Don't talk about having anti-racism, anti-bias training in classrooms or in buildings anymore or organizations because we don't want to have uncomfortable conversations.
Being close to the area here, it's not unusual for what you just mentioned about North Carolina. Um, North Carolina is its own. We're our own situation. We're trying to find ourselves here. Um, a woman who is well qualified, credentialed, but to be denied the offer of tenure because of a backdoor deal from a donor who did not feel as if that person would be beneficial to the university or to certain views. Um, that's just par for the course. A lot of things that are done here outside of the light of truth. Um, in terms of how we are to teach. But my thing is this: I think we go one step. Let's unpack it. I should not wait for someone else to teach my children about my history. I come, I'm glad I have my father on the phone, on the line, and my mother listening. They would teach us about our history. And that was part of the problem I had in elementary school and in junior high school. They would paint one side, but I said, wait a minute, I see a whole bunch of other books that my mother and father have and reading and showing me some stuff. John Mbiti, the African theologian. Dad was doing his dissertation. I saw that book, and he was talking about Africa, about the resources and the history, the civilization. And I said, wait a minute, that's not what they're telling us in these classes. But my mother and father, they would sit us down and talk to us and tell us about our history and would give us a sense of self-worth. And when we left North Carolina and went to Alabama, I went to class with Klansmen. It was children that their fathers were Klansmen. They would sit there and talk about the Klan, and I would say, that's for you, but that's not me. And they were amazed that they just could not refute my point of view or my ethos, my worldview, because it had been expanded from the teachings of my elders. I think it is upon us, and it goes back to the saying I shared with Joe, we would never get ahead as long as we allow our oppressors to teach our children.
That is why we teach. That is why we must teach that stuff ourselves. And for anyone who thinks race is not a problem in this country, I tell you this: President Joseph Biden won a free and fair election this past year in November. It was a free and it was a fair election. Anybody can say what they want. It was free and it was fair. But far too many people voted for Donald Trump. And that shows you where we are. Go ahead, Dad. I think I cut you off.
My only concern is that we at Communist Christian don't shout before we hear the sermon. Don't let a few gains cause us to get overjoyed and think we've arrived. We have not arrived. And when Michael said, but we got the ballot, yeah, we got the ballot, but we got to use the ballot. Don't now they're playing up Barack Obama and his wife and specials going across. They weren't before 6-7 years now. Years ago they were killing them, crucifying them. What they're doing, they're placating a portion of the society to keep us from realizing and recognizing what's going on. How anybody could change the reality of January the 6th and make it look like a tourist kind of thing and make it look like nobody's going to hurt nobody. And the most difficult thing, this congressman from Arizona who wants to put indictment on the man who shot and killed the lady coming through the window to kill them, and said he executed her. And she wasn't doing nothing but just coming into the building where she belonged to be. Now, you know, they are trying to repaint history. If we don't somehow put a stop to it, 20 years from now, January the 6th won't look like what it really was. They would have painted it to nothing more than a few folk coming up there and giving a little difficulty without doing what they should. One of the things that was said in one of the CNN interviews, and I agree with this, that if the Democrats and the so-called liberals would be as hard and vicious as the right folk are, they would not be sitting back and saying, oh, look what they're doing. If this would have happened on the other week, they'd have had all kinds of injunctions, all kinds of court actions, all kinds of commissions, raising all kind of trouble. But we sit down and say, well, look and see what they're doing. And sometimes you have to have the righteous indignation to get up and speak and not give them any kind of leeway at all. Call it what it is, describe what it is, and quit trying to make excuses for them and say they didn't know what they're doing. The other side would not have done it. There are times when even Jesus got mad and drove them out of the temple because they were messing up with what they were supposed to do. Righteous indignation is called for at this time to make sure that history does not get rewritten.
Well, y'all, we're right at the 1 o'clock hour, so I'm gonna have to we're gonna have to put a pin in this one today. Excellent conversation, y'all. I'll close out with my comments, and of course Steve and Mike and Dad. But I want to close out with these comments right here. One of the things, and it came from Reverend Pace today, and it's true. She said, what we call ourselves is not the true problem. The question is, why is it a problem for them to not call us that? And that is the issue at all. It's not a problem of what I'm saying to my people about me. But, the problem is, why are you so offended that you can't say it? And therein lies our struggle and our problem. So my sisters and brothers, thanks for joining us today. Keep up the good fight. To everyone making this possible, thank you so much for this conversation. Keep the conversation alive. Don't be afraid to talk about issues of race and issues of equality and issues of diversity and issues of inclusion. Don't be afraid of it. Don't be afraid. Don't be scared. It is something that we have to talk about. It is actually something that we have to really look at and talk about and dialogue about and deal with if we're going to try to make some sort of a difference. You can't sweep it under the rug, can't bury your head in the sand. To my Caucasian friends and colleagues and those that are doing that, stop, because it's not helping anybody. Steve?
You said everything. I have no problem having the courageous conversations, but you gotta be open to hear another person's point of view and perspective. You cannot just shut down where you may feel offended by your privilege, but really understanding that your privilege does have the possibility to harm others. And unless you recognize what your privilege is and how it can be utilized to hurt others, we can never really have a conversation. So I'm saying you got to have an open mind, you got to be courageous, and you got to be willing to do the work. So it is good to show up on certain days for a protest or a march, but we need you there for the off days too, to really do the hard work, because you realize that it's not just us, but it's required for you to change your mindset and what are you willing to sacrifice so that others may be able to thrive. And until we actually at that point, we're always going to be having some type of celebratory statements saying what it's like to achieve freedom. But true freedom can only be attained where all of us are willing to do our part and willing to sacrifice.
I think for me today, let's not we forget that we remember the Emmanuel 9, those persons who were sacrificed in Bible study. which we knew personally. I personally knew two of those persons.
Me too.
And today we call their names and remember that, you know, it was just viciousness, and it opened the door to what we're seeing now, that there were no boundaries in terms of they would go to in terms of committing a heinous act to initiate what he thought would be a racial war. So with those persons, the Emmanuel Nine, we remember them. If I would call their names, but I'm not going to do it because I want persons to research it and Google them and know their names. And we just lift them up and lift up all other persons who've been affected by this racist, by this emergence of racism that's just coming on, and it never goes away. We're in the New South, but that's the same old smile.
I'm just grateful that we are aware of the fact that the struggle is still on. We cannot find the kind of society and order when we cease to struggle and work to overcome all that has been depriving and destructive in making this world, especially our nation, to be a better place in which to live for everybody. So I pray that the younger generation that's coming along will understand that it is a struggle. Things don't come to you easily. There is always a tension between good and evil. I hope that we prepare ourselves for the struggle to overcome all the evil forces that would divide and destroy, and keep our in the fact that God wants us to be, but we must always struggle to make sure that everyone's rights are recognized, everyone's opportunities are made available, and everyone gains the respect which is due to them as being a part of God's humanity. So I prayed and I'm thankful that we are struggling with it, but the struggle is worthy of the prize that God has for us. So gracious Master, we thank you for allowing us to discuss. Keep us in your hand, keep us in your way to us. Seek first your kingdom and your righteousness, and all these things will be added unto us. In Jesus' name we ask it. Amen.
Amen. Thanks everybody for watching today. And as always, y'all just stay on for just a moment.